Welcome to Modleek. My name is Jeffrey Stern, and at Modleek, we look to shed a little light, light a spark, or in today's case, spread a little angel dust on a Jewish text or a tradition. I want to thank some of my faithful listeners for commenting and encouraging me, Michael P., my best man Bobby, and Sal for your advice. Matt, thanks also, and thanks for liking us on iTunes. We are now available on iTunes and Google Play Music, as well as SoundCloud and Stitcher. So whatever your favorite podcast platform is, go ahead and subscribe, and if you like what you hear, give us a like or a star or write a comment. In this week's Parsha of the Week, Vayetze, we have one of the many but most active stories of an angel, in this case wrestling with our protagonist Yaakov. So we're going to explore at least what Maimonides believes is something radically different about any story that an angel appears in. So snuggle up, sit back, buckle your seatbelt, and let's listen to the Torah tell the story of the angels in the Bible. This is our 10th podcast, and you may have noticed in at least 2 of them, I have discussed what in the world of the yeshiva is called a derech halimud, and that is a way of analyzing a text. At one podcast, I discussed Ma'aseh Avot Siman Labanim, that we're to look at the texts as though they are signs and as though the authors of those texts knew that they were signs and wrote their protagonists, more importantly, knowing that they were signs. In last week's podcasts, following the suggestions of Everett Fox and his forebears, we listened to the word plays and sounds of the Torah and used that as a derech halimud, a way of evaluating the texts, studying the texts, and grappling with the texts. Today we're going to jump to Moreh Nevuchim, the Guide for the Perplexed, where Maimonides makes a very radical statement about every story in the Bible and include either in the beginning, the middle, or the end an angel. So in the Guide to the Perplexed, and you can buy numerous versions of the guide. By the way, it was written originally in Arabic, so unless you know Arabic, pretty much any version you're going to read is going to be in translation. And you go to Book 2, Chapter 42. Maimonides writes as follows: "You have already shown that the appearance or speech of an angel mentioned in Scripture took place in a vision or a dream. It makes no difference whether this is expressly stated or not, as we have explained above. This is a point of considerable importance. In some cases, the account begins by stating that the prophet saw an angel. In others, the account apparently introduces a human being who ultimately is shown to be an angel, but it makes no difference. For if the fact that an angel has been heard is only mentioned at the end, you may rest satisfied that the whole account, from the beginning, describes a prophetic vision. In such visions, a prophet either sees God or speaks to him, as will be explained by us, or he sees an angel who speaks to him, or he hears someone speaking to him without seeing the speaker, or he sees a man who speaks to him, and learns afterwards that the speaker was an angel. In this later kind of prophecies, the prophet relates that he saw a man who was doing or saying something, and that he learned afterwards that it was an angel. This important principle was adopted by one of our sages, one of the most distinguished among them, Rav Chia the Great. And so Maimonides makes an absolutely radical statement, and you can almost consider it a derech halimud, which is a way of evaluating many stories in the Bible. I mean, if you think of it, when Adam and Eve are exiled from the Garden of Eden, there is a seraph, an angel, outside. So, according to what Maimonides has written, it was all a dream. Certainly, he goes on to quote by verse the story of our Parsha this week of Jacob wrestling with the angel. That whole story was a dream. And of course, that makes the most sense because in the context, Jacob does go to sleep and he has this encounter, and then he wakes up and crosses the river with a limp. But even if it doesn't include any reference to sleep or a dream state, Maimonides is making a very radical suggestion. And as is his way, he calls on us to come to our own conclusions. But we could clearly go back to Akedat Yitzchak, the sacrifice or the attempted sacrifice of Yitzchak, and say, not only was this a dream, but it probably was a bad dream, a nightmare. And if you think of it in terms of it being a dream, that actually does change everything. Because what it means is that this is not something that God requested or demanded. It's something that Abraham imagined God requesting. He probably tossed in his bed, had a cold sweat, and then he resolved the nightmare by having God pull away, have an angel come in, save the day, and suggest that maybe sacrificing his son wasn't such a good idea. So in a sense, by making a story like the sacrifice of Isaac into a dream, it turns it on its head. It's almost a paradigm shift. This then becomes the narrative of how our forebears struggled with weaning themselves from ideas of the time or weaning themselves from ideas that all of us have and that all of us need to resolve. And so many of these stories now become rather exercises in resolution of conflict rather than accounts of actual conflict. It's a radical way of studying the Torah. But let's get back to what Maimonides said. He quotes this Rabbi Chia. If you go and look at Rabbi Chia in Bereshit Rabbah, you would be excused if you were looking for a proof text of Maimonides' theory that every time there is an appearance of an angel, it actually means that this was a dream. In fact, all that Rabbi Chia is doing is talking about the very simple instance that Maimonides brought a second ago of a story that includes a man who turns out to be an angel. So in this, when the three men visited Abraham, we learn from Rabbi Chia that in fact these were the angels Michael, Gabriel, and Uriel. We'll come back a little bit to what the source of Maimonides' theory is and how he uses Rav Chia maybe as a little bit of a subterfuge to make us think that in fact there is a proof text for his radical theory. But let's go back to Maimonides and flush out just how radical his theory is. So as I said before, Maimonides continues, "Note this well, for it is one of the great mysteries. The same, I hold, is the case when it is said in reference to Jacob, and a man wrestled with him. This took place in a prophetic vision, since it is expressly stated at the end that it was an angel. The circumstances are here exactly the same as those in the vision of Abraham, where the general statement, 'and the Lord appeared to him,' is followed by a detailed description. Similarly, the account of the vision of Jacob begins, 'and the angels of God met him.' So now he's included both the Akedah as well as the more obvious story of the angels going up the ladder and coming down the ladder." Maimonides goes on. "This is the principal method by which most of the difficult passages in the Bible can be explained." So Maimonides makes reference to an earlier chapter. The earlier chapter that he makes reference to is chapter 41. And there he says, "Know again that in the case of everyone about whom exists a scriptural text that an angel talked to him or that speech came to him from God, this did not occur in any other way than in a dream or in a vision of prophecy." So this is very radical stuff, and it gives Maimonides quite a lot of wiggle room. If you go ahead and add another rule that Maimonides gives as early as Book 1, Chapter 2, where he says, and I quote, "Every Hebrew knew that the term Elohim is equivocal, designating the deity, the angels, and the rulers governing the cities." So you may even argue that not only do we follow the great Reb Chia, who says that in many stories in the Bible where, as when the three men visited Abraham, the men were not men, but they were angels. Similarly, in many cases where reference is made to Elohim, it doesn't necessarily mean God. It can mean angels or man as well. And so we're given license by Maimonides to read many, many stories and narratives in the Bible in a radically new way. We look at them not as reality, but more as a dream, not as a fact that happened in reality, but rather as an unresolved conflict that happened in our communal mind and possibly happens to all of us in our personal minds as we struggle to resolve issues of life, death, meaning, love, obedience, passion, optimism, happiness, and joy. Maimonides himself goes a little way into explicating now how we can study the texts. At one point, he talks about the different levels of prophecy, and he talks about dreams that include thunder and are very loud, and he talks about dreams that are said in a whisper. In terms of conflict resolution, Maimonides quotes the Talmud in Barachot. The rabbis call it a dream solved in a dream, which really blew my mind. If you go to Barachot 55b and you see the original quote that Maimonides is quoting, it says as follows: Rabbi Yochanan also said, 3 types of dreams are fulfilled: a morning dream, a dream which his friend has about him, and a dream interpreted in the midst of a dream. V'chalom sheniftar betoch chalom. Actually, Barachot 55b is worth reading. It has some amazing ideas about dreams, which, if you think about it, they always say that the Eskimos have many, many words for snow and snowflake. It stands to reason that if Maimonides is correct and so much of the Hebrew Bible is a dream, that the rabbis should have a lot to say about a dream. So let me read you a little bit from Barachot 55b. Rabbi Huna ben Ami stated that Rav Padar said in the name of Rav Yochanan, "He who sees a dream and his soul is depressed should go and have it interpreted in the presence of 3. He should have it interpreted? But Rav Chisda has said, an uninterpreted dream is like an unread letter. Chalma de lo mifshar, ga'agrata de lo makri." Wow, that's a beauty. Rav Chisda also said, neither a good nor a bad dream is fulfilled in every detail. Lo chalma tava mekayem kulia, velo chalma bisha mekayem kulia. Rabbi Chisda also said, a bad dream is preferable to a good dream. Chalma bisha adif mechalma tava. Well, that would certainly be the case if dreams are meant to resolve conflict. A good dream doesn't do anything. A bad dream, now that resolves conflict. Rav Chisda explains, when a dream is bad, the pain it causes is sufficient to prevent its fulfillment. And when the dream is good, the joy it brings is sufficient. So if you have a bad dream, it's as if you've already gotten all the suffering you need to get. You can work it out. But when you have a good dream, so you don't get any further joy. You've already gotten all the joy you're going to get in the dream. So Reb Joseph concurs. He says, as for a good dream, even in my own case, its cheerfulness frustrates it so that it is actually not realized. You wake up so cheerful, there's nothing else. It's as good as it gets. Rabbi Yochanan, in the name of Rav Shimon ben Yochai, said, just as one cannot have wheat without straw, similarly it is impossible for a dream to be without something that is vain. Below devarim b'telim. I guess that means that we have to take the details in a dream, whether it's a personal dream or now as we read the Torah, with a grain of salt. Here's a good one. A dream, though it be fulfilled in part, is never completely realized. Whence is this learnt? From Joseph. For it is written, and behold, the sun and the moon and 11 stars bow down to me. So he got a little bit of the type of celebrity worship that he wanted, but certainly this was not something that was actually fulfilled. Chalom afal pi shemikzato mitkayem, kulo einu mitkayem. And maybe that relates now as we read the Torah and promises are made. If the promises are made in a dream-like fashion, we get some. We don't get it all. Rabbi Levi said, a man should always wait up to 22 years for the fulfillment of a good dream. La'olam yitzapeh adam l'chalom tov ad chufbeit shana. And finally, I'll conclude my little side trip into Barachot 55b and its excursion into dreams by giving its advice if you have a bad dream. So you come in front of the Kohanim and they give you the priestly blessing, and then you say the following. Lord of the universe, Ribona Shel Olam, I am thine, and my dreams are thine. A dream have I dreamed, and I know not what it is. Ani shelcha v'chalamoti shelcha, chalom chalamti ve'eni yodea mahu. Or I dreamed concerning others. If they be good dreams, strengthen and fortify them, and may they be fulfilled like the dreams of Joseph. But if they require to be remedied, heal them as the waters of Marah were healed by the hands of Moses our teacher, as Miriam was healed from her leprosy, as Hezekiah from his illness, and like the waters of Jericho sweetened by the hands of Elisha. And as thou didst turn the curse of the wicked Balaam into a blessing, so do thou turn all my dreams for me into good. He should conclude his prayer simultaneously with the Kohanim so that the congregation responds, Amen. And if this prayer sounds a little bit familiar to you, you will find it in the Siddur where you can recite it silently as the priests do the Duchanim service, and you talk about your dreams. And this is the reason why the dreams are connected to the Duchanim service, because if you have a bad dream, the Talmud tells us to go to a Kohen who can then bless you. But now getting back to Maimonides. So it really becomes now an unbelievably fascinating mission, and maybe harkens back to some of the issues that we touched when we discussed Freud's Moses and monotheism, where in fact when you look at a narrative or a story or a promise or a description in the Hebrew Bible, and you come from it from the premise that it is a dream rather than a reality, and that it's not so much about a protagonist as it is about the protagonist's mental state, the protagonist's concerns, the protagonist's hopes and wishes. And if you step back one step further, and now you look at what the author of these narratives was putting into not so much the actions of the protagonists, but into their psyche, it becomes really fascinating. And so that if we look at the Akedah not as something that happened in reality, but something that represents the turmoil and struggle that Abraham was having within his own head, then can't we also look at the development of the halakha too, where there are certain biases in the halakha. A good example would be women's issues, where we look back at the Bible and we say, okay, the Bible treats woman treats women less equal than men, but in what direction is it going? In other words, if this is a dream sequence and we're starting at the beginning of the dream and we touch base at the middle of the dream and we have a vision of what the end of the dream will be when resolution is finally achieved, we start to look at patterns, and the patterns become more important than the reality. So if a woman is given a ketubah, is given contractual obligations, and we say, well, that's kind of new and refreshing, that means that the dream sequence included ideas that the participants were playing with and were trying to struggle with. And the same goes obviously for slavery, where the laws that were current in the ancient Near East are modified, evolve. So evolution becomes part and parcel of this understanding of the dream sequence of the Hebrew Bible. Understanding the Torah now becomes so much more of a challenge and so much more of a joy in terms of analyzing ideas, the development of ideas, looking into the Torah and seeing some stigmas, some biases that we are embarrassed about. If it's a dream, there's nothing to be embarrassed about. The more one talks about it, like the more one talks about a bad dream, the more it gets resolved. So I thank Maimonides for providing us with this wonderful insight. And let's continue to learn the Torah using this as well as other ways of study that have been used by those smarter and greater before us, but which can be used by us in novel and new ways. Enjoy. So, as is our custom, we end Madlik with a song, and since we've been talking so much about angels, I've chosen a song about angels. It's from the liturgy. We say it before we go to sleep at night and at the Shalashudis, the third meal on the Shabbat, as the sun sets. The words are, B'Shem Hashem Elokei Yisrael, may the angel Michael be at my right hand, may Gabriel at my left, before me Uriel, behind me Raphael, and above my head the divine presence. The tune was composed by Shlomo Korbach, and this recording, which can be found on iTunes, was recorded by Shlomo's daughter Neshama Korbach and is part of the album HaNeshama Shel Shlomo. So listen, imagine, and sweet dreams to all.
Small